This is the Smart Buildings Academy podcast with Phil Zito, episode 436. Hey folks, Phil Zito here, and welcome to episode 436. It has been quite a bit. I've been crazy busy this summer, and it's great to be back here with y'all. So I'm going to take you through kind of what's going on, why we've been gone so long. I've got some messages from some of y'all who have been like, hey, you've been gone. What's going on? Is the podcast done? Are you done? Are you making any more episodes? So, yep, we're making more episodes. Quite honestly, behind the scenes, we're trying to figure out a new format. We're debating between, a panel format or maybe like a more produced format. Not sure. I'm open to ideas and suggestions. So definitely pop those in the chat. Let me know kind of what y'all are thinking. And let's just kind of go through today and what we've got planned out. So I'm going to go through kind of what we've been up to. We've made a lot of interesting changes. We've grown our team substantially. I'm going to go through some sales tips, operations tips, talk about some technical topics. We're going to handle a question that I got via LinkedIn chat. And then we'll just see kind of where we're sitting at. We'll do some question and answer, and I might have a question for you. Let's dive in. So over the summer, we did, oh man, it's been like a freaking blur, to be honest. We rolled out our new Workforce Development 2.0 program, an OEM version and kind of a vendor agnostic version of it. And then we rolled out a new owner training course. And that was real interesting. Like it was a learning experience. I don't know. I mean, for those of you who haven't created training in the past, it was really different because now we have Michael Roper, who y'all have seen on the podcast, and we have David Perkins, who y'all have seen on the podcast if you've watched like the past episodes. And then Nicole Ween, our operations manager, she's been working with them to stay organized. So it hasn't been me producing the trainings like it has in the past. And thank God, because they actually use spell check and things like that. No, I'm just joking. But in all seriousness, they are professional teachers. And watching them produce, it's been really cool because I don't know, those of you who are like parents, when your kid is young, you watch them, they take their first steps and you're like, oh, this is cool. And then like I've got a 17-year-old now, 15-year-old, 12-year-old. And as you get further along, they start to really become independent. And it's scary, but at the same time, it's really neat to watch them progress. And that's kind of what's been happening here is now we've expanded and we've got these dedicated trainers who have run apprenticeships, who have done training at large OEMs, who are professional teachers. We got them producing the training content, and that's been really wild. It's expanded our capacity, and now we're working with pretty much every OEM in the market in some form or capacity. We also brought on 3 new folks on the sales side of things. We brought on Carlin Haywood. He's the most recent addition. He'll be handling owner sales for Central Region. And he's got a wide background in customer service, Naval Academy grad. We've got Earl Hill, who, funny enough, is Nicole's brother. And he's come on as a student success manager. And so we've had a ramp up of our free skill assessment, a lot more people going through that. So he's helping with that. He's helping with a lot of the customer service things. We've got Todd Herbal, and he's actually a former student of ours, and he handles owner sales in the South. And so Todd's been, he's been with us about the same time as Adam. Oh my God, Adam, you're going to kill me. I'm going to butcher your last name. Why do you have to have a hard last name? Kakamies? I don't know. I'm so butchering it. He's going to kill me in Slack. But we've got Adam as well. Adam used to work with Julian. Julian's our director of sales, and Julian worked with me at the JCI Dallas branch, when I first started in this industry, he was on service sales and I was an ops manager. And I was on the construction side of the business. And obviously, because he was in service sales, he was on the service side. But he ran data analytics at JCI Corporate, and Adam worked with him on that team. So Adam's come on board as a salesperson for the Northeast for the owner side of the business. So we've had a lot of growth. You're like, owner side of the business. What is that? Well, traditionally, we've been focused on contractors, a lot of contractor training. If you could think of a system integrator, if you could think of an OEM, if you could think of a contractor, we're probably involved with them in some way, shape, or form. And, the owners kept coming to us. Like we'd have, the State Department, the GSA, Federal Reserve, and they'd be buying through our website. And, I'd hear the Shopify ding on my phone while I'd be sitting, hanging out with the wife and the kids. And I'd be like, that's interesting. Someone in like Azerbaijan bought a course. And then I'd dig into it and it'd be like state.gov. I was like, oh, that's real interesting. And so I was like, why are they buying this? And then started to ask them questions and started to understand kind of what owners are needing for training. And that led to us creating an owner course that a major healthcare organization asked us to create. And we started to roll that out through their organization. And so we've expanded. We've got owner salespeople now who are going after like the K through 12, higher ed, state and local gov markets, is we get a lot of people who want to train their people. And I wish I'd realized that sooner because it's a much bigger market than contractors and OEMs. But it was good that I didn't realize it because I don't think organizationally we were ready at the time, being totally honest and transparent with you. But we got that rolled out. We're working on Workforce Development 2.0, where we're getting folks 80% billable by week 4. And we've gotten that now to where we're doing monthly cohort starts. So every month we're opening a cohort for enrollment. So if you got someone who, you want to go and take and turn them into a tech, and you want them like 60% billable week 3, 80% billable week 4 and beyond, and you want them to have like 3 years of technical knowledge in a couple months, that's what that program does. And I think we're on our 6th cohort now. Nicole will probably end up slacking me and being like, no, Phil, it's the 5th or something, but we're somewhere around there. So that's what we've been up to. That's why I haven't been on here, because I've just been so freaking busy. And I did an elk hunt with my son. Funny story. We were hunting on doing a depredation hunt, really like trying to go. It's a population control hunt, basically. And the farmers on where we're allowed to hunt, they had a fee. If you scored above a certain size elk, you had to pay money. And I didn't expect that to happen because these depredation hunts are like low percentage hunts. You very rarely actually even see an animal. And it ended up where we saw a ton of animals, but they were small. And then we're like giving up hope. We're driving along and there's these animals like standing in the road and couldn't get to the guns in time. But finally, my son found them, walked around a hill, sat on a hill for 4 hours. And I'm like, whatever you do, that's really big. Don't shoot that thing because there's a trophy fee associated with it. And of course, what does he do? He shoots the big animal. And then now we're having to pay a trophy fee. And it's like ridiculous. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Trevor, really? Trevor's my son's name. Like, did you really just do that? So that was fun. The wife was not happy, but it's an experience. Those of you who are interested, like shoot me a LinkedIn message or a YouTube. I'll send you the picture. It's pretty cool. He's like in velvet. It's huge for those of you who are like into hunting. It's pretty neat. But yeah, so that took time. Then, the wife and I did some travel. We did conferences. I was at IBCon. But yeah, we're back to it. We're going to be doing the weekly podcast again. I got this one. And then next week, actually, Rachel, who's my wife and co-owner, we have like a really open discussion about the business. And we're going to try to do that monthly at a minimum. She's like probably listening to this and like, Phil, did you just commit me to doing this monthly? Yes, I did. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. It took 30 minutes to actually start the podcast recording because it's weird. Like you talk to your spouse every day and she's co-owner of the business, handles all the cultural stuff. And so it's like we talk all the freaking time about really deep issues. And then it's like trying to do a podcast where we're just like blankly staring at each other. And she's like, Phil, be yourself, be authentic. And I'm like, I'm trying to be authentic. She's like, you got the podcast voice again. And I'm like, can't help it. It's automatic. So yeah, but we got that coming out. That's going to be pretty cool. So I think that's all the updates that I can think of while we've been gone this month. So let's dive into what you came here for, which is kind of stuff that you can learn to be more successful in sales, in operations, in technical, and let's answer some questions that I got sent to me. You can always post your questions in the chat. I definitely encourage you to Yes, let me mute that. There we go. Sometimes I don't see them. They show up in like LinkedIn or in YouTube, but they don't show up on the actual stream for me. So if I don't get to your question, like I will try to find it. So Sales Corner, that's what I want to talk about first. I've been training our sales team lately. I've been doing a lot of like core skills sales training. We've been doing a lot of round robin cold call coaching. We've been doing a lot of like spin and challenger and things of that nature. There's a lot of noise in the market. And really, in order for us to best serve our customers, we have to understand the situations. But oftentimes, it's a little awkward as to what you actually need to do to engage a customer. I don't know for you, maybe it's just me, but at times you find yourself in a situation, you're tracking with the customer, you've done active listening, you're repeating back, active listenings where you're like, for example, today I had a call with a customer. Oh, your team is X size. So here's what it looked like. So what I've heard you say is your team is X size. The challenges you're facing are X, Y, Z, and you've done ABC to address those challenges so far. Is that correct? Oh yeah, Phil, that's correct. Great. And then you freeze. You're like, crap. What do I say next? So that's where I like this power of a fallback question. Rachel, who you'll see on the podcast next week, she likes to use, I'm going to butcher this, the imagination question, the possible question, the something. Rachel, you're probably listening to this. Just post it in chat, whatever it is. But miracle question. That's what I think it was. So the miracle question is basically where you're like, if you could wave a magic wand or if you could do XYZ, what would that look like? And I did this with a customer the other day. Was on a call with a customer. I noticed on the whiteboard behind his head, he had the name of projects he was working on, and one of them was Disney. And so I said to him, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be your fairy godfather today, and I'm going to grant you one wish. So if you could go and accomplish anything to solve the issue we just discussed, what would that be? How would you do it? And that just gets them thinking, because what I've communicated to our team and what I want you to communicate to your sales team, you're never going to change anyone's mind. Like, you're not going to go and get them to be all of a sudden, oh, I want to use your services. This is true for you technicians listening. You want to get a raise, or you want to convince a customer that they need to do some sort of service action or whatever. You are not going to convince someone to do that. It has to be their own idea. And so going and using that miracle question gets them thinking and like creating a solution in their head that then they become personally invested in and that you can explore. So it's a very powerful technique, and it's very customer centric because you're problem solving together. And oftentimes you'll like discover things that maybe you didn't know were limitations of that customer's business. So that's one. I also like the "that's interesting, tell me more." My team kind of jokes because I use that all the time when I'm talking to customers, when I'm talking to my employees, when I'm talking to my kids. I go and I'm like, "That's interesting, tell me more." Especially now that I have a 12-year-old daughter and she's like, "I need a boyfriend to give me attention and hug me." And I'm like, "No, you don't. You don't need boys till you're 40. But I fight that temptation. I'll be like, "That's interesting. Tell me more. Why do you feel that way?" And then they flush it out and you just listen and you use active listening to repeat back and you discover that person's world. And once you understand that person's world, then you can exist in that person's world and you can actually provide solutions. All right, let's dig into operations. And if you have any ideas on fallback questions, I'd encourage you to post them in the chat. Like if you have a fallback question, you're like, "That's a great question." I encourage you to go in the chat and share that fallback question. Let's keep moving along. So operations. Summer is starting to wrap up. You're starting to get towards the end of your schoolwork. K through 12 stuff starting to close. It's that last, week push before Memorial Day. Jeez, Phil, really? Labor Day. Yes. Correct. Yeah. September 4th, right? I think. So it's that last push between now and Labor Day. You're trying to avoid liquidated damages. You're trying to get all your school staff work done, and you're trying to get everything good. And then it hits. It's that lull, right? You've got maybe a week after school start in Labor Day, but by mid-September, you start to hit that little bit of a lull, and you look at your team and you go, "Crap, what do we do?" I recommend you do a post-summer analysis. So we've talked about this in a lot of episodes. We've talked about doing root cause analysis. We've talked about post-project analysis using labor codes, using material codes, so that you could track revenue, you could track efficiency by labor type. But what I encourage you to do is a post-summer analysis, and what it will consist of is a staffing analysis, a efficiency analysis, and a sales analysis, not necessarily in that order. So why sales analysis? If your salespeople under or oversold or missed scope or anything like that, that led you into a situation where the project wasn't as profitable, didn't have as many hours, you missed material, you missed scope, that's something that you really want to do, look at, and address. Now, why do I recommend that with a post-summer analysis? Oftentimes, those sales are made in March. Oftentimes, those sales are plan and spec. They may be design bid or design build. And they execute and close pretty quickly. They tend to execute across a compressed time period. So it gives you really quick feedback if your sales team misestimated something, if they misscoped something, just anything that may identify gaps in your estimating, takeoff, or sales process. And you can immediately address that. So that's something I highly recommend for you sales leaders. On the operational side, hopefully you've taken my advice. You've got job task codes. Hopefully you have figured out, hey, this is how much time we have allocated for install, for programming, for et cetera. And you have mapped that out and built it into whatever your project management software is. If you've done that, then I recommend you do a pre and post assessment of, okay, we estimated this. This is our actually executed revenue and executed margin. Here's the gap. And then you go and you address that gap. There was a third one I wanted you to cover, but that's slipping my brain right now. I didn't have that written down. It'll come back to me. I'm going to move into the technical talk, though. I've run into a lot of people lately who are using IP controls, and they're asking me, like, Phil, how do we deal with addressing? Specifically, how do we deal with dynamic addressing? So dynamic addressing is a concept from Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, which pulls from a pool of addresses, IP addresses, and assigns those IP addresses to specific devices, specifically host devices on a network. Now, this is very common in the IT world. If you have a home Wi-Fi system, you know what it is. You've seen 192.168.1. whatever on your home Wi-Fi system as your IP addresses. And you're like, okay, I've seen that. I've seen that in action. BAS systems tend not to do very well with that. They need static addresses. Lately, though, a lot of IT staff, they don't want to give you a static address. Still to this day, it's an issue. So how do you go into a dynamic environment and get a static address for your devices that can, make a more reliable system and make it easier to troubleshoot because you know what address pairs up to what device? Now, I'm not going to get into naming and using domain names in lieu of IP. You definitely can do that. But what you can do is what's called a DHCP permanent lease. So what I've done is, and you can do this on the client side or you can do this on the network side. I prefer it done on the network side versus the client side. So you can use it depends on the networking software, but you can work with the IT staff to use, like sticky commands. So when you go and you assign an IP address to a device, it automatically links to that device until it's assigned otherwise. It pulls it from a dynamic pool, but it gives that address to that device. My argument around this when I'm talking to IT people is you're going to have to assign that address anyways, rather than re-engineer a separate subnet that is a dedicated set of addresses. Let's just make it sticky from this dynamic pool. So you can do that. Another way is you can do it on the client side, which is you can reserve an address from that pool as long as that address isn't taken. And that should issue a dynamic address so that anytime that interface card resets, a static address, you'll have what is called a permanent lease, and it should ignore the lease expiration. We can go a lot deeper into DHCP in a future episode. But hopefully that is a strategy that I encourage you all to use in your conversation with your IT staff or your customer's IT staff. Let's go into the question of the week. Okay, so I got this crazy question sent to me just out of respect to the person. And I don't mean crazy like it was crazy. It was just interesting. So out of respect to the person, I'm not going to use anything that would describe their organization or even like their gender. So it's going to be completely, anonymous essentially. And if any of you want to send me a question and you're like, Phil, answer it and do it anonymously, I'm totally game for that. Just hit me up on social and we'll do that. So this person is responsible for a pretty large organization of mission critical assets. And they want to know how to take layman people who are working, inside these buildings, inside these assets to go and understand like, oh, if this is going on, I should make this adjustment to the indoor quality. And at which point does the indoor quality of the building or become inhospitable to people? And so what that looks like is basically you're taking ASHRAE 55, which is thermal comfort, and translating it to the common person. And the common person doesn't understand like heat index. They don't understand psychrometrics. So I did a lot of thinking. I was like, how would you do this? I think it would have to be locational. So someone in the southwest of the US versus someone in the northwest of the US is going to have completely different psychrometric charts based on elevation, based on part of the earth. So you would have essentially, based on wherever you're at, you would have like a red, yellow, green chart. and it would say, oh, if temperature and humidity are X, then indoor temperature needs to be Y. And if they're exposed to this sort of temperature, you see it all the time on like frostbite charts. If the wind is this and the temperature is this, this is your exposure parameters. And so you do the same. You'd say this is the safe exposure. So I would imagine a 3-layer chart, and it would be temperature, humidity, and activity level. And based on those 3 variables, you would calculate an estimated time of exposure. And so there's much deeper aspects to this person's question, but it's something I want you all to think about if you serve customers. A lot of them don't realize what ASHRAE 55 says and what psychrometric charts mean, which is, I sit out on our porch and I'll take calls on our porch, and it'll be 82 degrees, 10% relative humidity in the shade with a breeze. And it feels amazing. I actually find myself getting cold at times and wanting to actually put on, a blanket or some socks or something. On the flip side, I grew up in Houston, and at 70 degrees, 80% relative humidity, it feels miserable and it's horrible. So you definitely have to factor that in and really educate your customers. They may be going and making controls decisions that they don't need to make, whether that's dry bulb temperature, whether that is a enthalpy comparison between return and outdoor air for economizer usage. There's a variety of scenarios where efficiency comes into play. And if you don't consider those, you're going to be making not necessarily the best decisions for your assets and real estate. I'm going to hop around real quick, see if we got any questions in the social, because it doesn't always show up. But I definitely want to see. Oh my gosh, I got to mute all these places. All right. So we see that. Okay. A couple folks in YouTube, a couple folks in LinkedIn. Good to see y'all. Just so you know, I'm going to try to figure out a consistent time for right now. We're going to aim for Friday at 12 p.m. Pacific. But that time zone may change as we move towards potentially a different format. So my question to you all is, what question do you have for me? So if you're watching this on YouTube, what questions did this video spark? If you're watching this on LinkedIn, what thoughts and questions did this create for you? What would you like to see us cover on a future episode? Definitely let us know in the comments, even if you're watching this recording. If you're listening to this, you can go to podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/436. Once again, that's podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/436. And you can refer back to this video. You can go and post questions there. You can reach out to us, let us know. Like I said, next week, it's going to be all about culture, talent management, just the pain of running a business and the joy of running a business. If you've ever wondered, like, what is it behind the scenes, we're going to dive into that, be pretty raw and authentic. And I think for those of you who resonate with employee engagement, with talent management, if you've ever felt like, I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, a JCI conference, and a gentleman walked up to me and he was like, we need to do career planning. We need to do talent management, but my boss isn't into that. He's very old school. I said, like, why don't you go talk to him? And he's like, well, he might get upset. And I'm like, thinking to myself, like, dude, like, man up, just go talk to him. But, that's just, I wouldn't have been that way before some of the trainings that we've been through internally here at Smart Buildings Academy, because it's scary. You create this like vision of talking to your boss or your leader that is scary. You create all these scenarios in your head that are scary. And oftentimes these scenarios are actually way worse than the reality. Almost every time they've been way worse than what I've actually experienced. And I will tell you, like looking back, I've created more pain trying to control interactions between individuals than I have just like trying to interact with the individuals. And I think you'll hear that in episode 437. So, hey, folks, we're back. I really appreciate having you all here. I did miss talking to y'all. It was so heads down, so busy. But yeah, we're going to have a lot of cool things coming down the pipe. Most likely a panel format podcast moving forward, probably starting sometime in September. We're going to be doing a lot more guest interviews, bringing customers onto the podcast, some case study stuff, and that's about it. I appreciate you all being here. Thanks so much. And I look forward to talking to y'all in next week's podcast episode. Take care.